When I was a little girl, I visited the town pool in my dad's hometown of LaCroix City. They had a diving board and a high dive, and I really wanted to jump off of that high dive. By the time I got to the top, I realized just how tall this high dive was, but I decided to jump anyway. After jumping, I realized that I had been falling for miles, even though it had only been a few inches. With each inch that I fell, the panic grew and grew and grew. In the short span of a few seconds, it felt like I had been falling for years. My body froze as I hit the water and felt like it had fallen through a sheet of ice. Ever since that day, I have dealt with a petrifying fear of heights. Fears and the reactions that come with them are not fun. They cause stress and anxiety. I hope to relieve some of your stress as I explain what a fear is and how it's different from a phobia, by learning the most common types of fears and just how common they are, and then finally by explaining the effects our fears have on our bodies and how we can manage them. What is a fear? When most people think of the word fear, they think of some specific thing that scares them or gives them anxiety. When I think of the word fear, I think of the high dive in my dad's hometown pool. I think of a tall slide at the playground. And I even think of Jordan Creek Mall in Des Moines, walking on the store side of the walkways just to avoid the railing that looks down into the lower level. Merriam-Webster defines a fear as an unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. According to the Huffington Post, a fear is a response that we feel by a perceived or real threat. For example, if somebody were afraid of spiders, they would experience a mild to moderate anxiety attack when seeing a spider. Merriam-Webster defines a phobia as an exaggerated, usually inexplicable and illogical fear of a particular object, class of objects, or situation. The Huffington Post describes a phobia and a fear very similarly, with one key difference. The anxiety felt during a phobia is so intense that it interrupts the quality of their life and their ability to function. Going back to the spider example, if somebody suffers from a phobia of spiders, they will think most of their day about where a spider could be, if they'll come across a spider, or any random fact about the spider itself. The thing about fears is that without treatment, they can quickly turn into phobias. According to Fox News Science, the chemical released in our brains when we come across a fear is called glutamate. The glutamate released in our brains sends a message to the adrenal gland, which secretes adrenaline into our body, giving us the fight or flight response. When we experience a phobia or an anxiety attack related to a phobia, the common symptoms are an increased heart rate and sweating or shivering. Fears are natural for our body to experience, but without guidance can easily become escalated. Now that we've learned about what a fear is and how it's different from a phobia, I would like to talk about the most common fears. According to LifeScience.com, a fear of heights is not that uncommon. 13% of our population fears heights, but 3 to 5% of our adult population has a phobia of heights, which is called acrophobia. According to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, the most common fear documented is a social phobia. A social phobia, when somebody suffers from a social phobia, they experience fear of judgment in any activity that they do. For example, eating in front of somebody or even speaking in front of somebody. The top fears are open spaces, heights, flying, enclosed spaces, insects, snakes, dogs, storms, and needles. With each fear, a phobia comes right along, and these phobias have fancy scientific names to define them. A fear of needles is called trypanophobia. A fear of storms is called astrophobia, which 2% of our population suffers from. A fear that you may have heard of before is called claustrophobia, which is a fear of enclosed and tight spaces. 5 to 7% of our population suffer from claustrophobia. Arachnophobia has a large sufferer population of 30.5% in our population. 1 in 20 people suffer from a social phobia. To expand on my point of how fears affect us, I'd like to illustrate how fears look and feel to a person suffering from them. Referring back to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, the most common symptoms that we face during a fears are dizziness, shortness of breath, sweating and shivering, increased heart rate, nausea, the increased need to use the restroom, and confusion. According to NHS Choices, they list 10 ways to manage your fears. The first fear I'll talk about is to face your fears. In this article, it talks about facing your fears being very important so that the second time you face them, it is a lot easier to handle. The second strategy is to take a timeout. When your body is worked up so much during a fear, it is very hard to bring it back down to normal and calm yourself down. So if you're able to take a walk around the block or something like that, you are able to physically calm your body down, which will help your mind soothe itself out. The next strategy is to breathe through the panic. Breathing through the panic is important because it releases a physical reaction from your fear. My next strategy is to think of the worst possible outcome. I know that sounds really contradictory to facing your fears, but it's important. It can help. Let's say your worst possible outcome is to suffer a heart attack from your fear. Try thinking yourself into having that heart attack. It's not possible. So by the time you figured out you won't end up getting that heart attack, your fear has subsided and you've distracted yourself. To do the opposite of that strategy, think of your happy place. Thinking of the place that makes you the happiest in the whole world gives you an immediate sense of comfort and relief from the fear you're experiencing. The last strategy that I'm going to expand on is talking about it. If you are not able to communicate your fears with somebody else, it is like building up the anxiety in your body without a vent to release any of that stress. I encourage you to take some of these strategies and use them yourself to find what works best for you in decreasing your stress. To recap what we've learned today, I talked about what a fear is and how it's different from a phobia. We learned what the most common fears are and how common they are. And then we learned how to manage the fears that we face and how they affect us. I Little learning is a dangerous thing, but and the glutamate will be released from your brain. But don't panic, breathe a sigh of relief as we are now done talking about fears.